this is a global
Absolutely.
event.
Absolutely.
This is a global problem. It's not a United States problem. And it seems to me, if we were idealistically optimistic, we would imagine a day, not too far down the road, where you could have OPEC producers, the Russians, the consumers, United States, UK, and everybody else, come to the conclusion, look, this is going to be a problem for the entire economy. Doesn't matter where you are. Third world, you're in the first world, doesn't matter. How do we mitigate it? How can we conserve, prepare to go to the next stage, help the third world countries, like you said? Do you see that happening, that we could have a global summit of, let's say, impending shortage where we could have a collaboration worldwide to mitigate the situation?
No. I mean, we don't collaborate in anything, do we, worldwide?
No, we don't.
This is a big enough problem for it to be worth us collaborating worldwide, but it's not going to happen, Bruce. It really isn't. I think that the best we can do at this point is try and come to a solution which all the world might accept about there being a problem. I don't think the world is going to collaborate on solving the problem, but when I gave my talk this morning, what I tried to stress was that I think we, the people, deserve access to decent forecasts of what's going to happen. And I think that that's something the world perhaps could agree on. If we could convince a small number of the bigger countries in the world that a problem there is a potential problem, then we might get those countries to agree on sharing data, on collaborating with using shared data to understand how big the problem is. And that, I think, would be a big step forward. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, or maybe all the peak oilers are wrong, and there isn't actually a problem. Maybe the industry is just about going to get us through this thing. I don't believe that, and I think there's good data to show it's not true. But let's get better data. Let's try and understand what the situation is. And if we can show convincingly there's a problem, well, then maybe governments will be a little bit more likely to collaborate on solving it. But first of all, we need to decide just how big the problem is. And for that, we, the people, need access to data which national oil companies, and to some extent the IOCs, currently own. It's their data, but I think that morally they need to get that data into a place where we can all access it and understand it.
So if there is a window of opportunity to get the data, it seems that
it's a very short one.
It's a very short one. And if we have 2 or 3 million barrels a day of excess production capacity, as it seems, probably maybe 2 or 3, you were showing about maybe 3 million, perhaps we have, it's best that if the Western countries, consumer countries, are demanding anything from the OPEC countries, they demand now. Look, I need to have the audited numbers now. Otherwise,
absolutely.
So once this gap is closed, once the supply and demand meet, at that time, it's seller's market, and it's too late.
It's too late.
It is too late.
Yeah.
It is too late.
No, whatever we're going to do, if we're going to get through this thing smoothly with minimum pain, we've already left it so late that there is going to be some pain, but if we want to get through it with minimum pain, then we need to get access to this data soon.
So what you're saying is that if you were to go to a company, a corporation, for example, this hypothetically, for past 20 years, they're not giving you audited information, but they keep telling you, we have $100 million. Okay, you say, okay, I trust you, and I'm working off that, right? After 20 years, one day you just say, wait a minute, don't I have to get some kind of an audit from you? Aren't we doing the same thing, for example, with Saudis and the most of the OPEC countries? They're not providing any audited information. It has been nothing. Yet we're relying, so-called, on the reserves.
Absolutely.
And there's no audited.
No.
There's nothing is audited.
Well, there isn't anything to audit, quite honestly, Bruce. I mean, it's not as though it's not that we've got numbers that aren't audited. We just don't have any numbers.
Don't have any numbers.
The only numbers we've got are the numbers that the OPEC countries give us each year, which are obviously, I was going to say obviously wrong, but they obviously don't mean what we would like them to mean. And we see countries like Saudi Arabia telling us each year their reserves are exactly the same as they were a year before. Well, we know that's not. That's unlikely to be the case. They can't be discovering each year exactly what they're producing. So Abu Dhabi, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, their numbers clearly are either wrong or don't mean what we think they mean. Iran has at least its numbers changed a little bit, which makes them slightly more plausible, but I don't think they're right either, because as we've talked previously, I think that Iran changed its reserve numbers very significantly back in the 1980s, and I don't think there was any technical justification for most of that change.
But did that happen at the same time in the region where everybody's...
No, I'm not picking on Iran. Iran actually is a bit better than some of the others, A, because the increase wasn't quite as big as some of the others, and B, because at least since then it looks as though they've, to some extent, tried to change the numbers to reflect discovery and usage. But you say we haven't been auditing the numbers. I mean, there hasn't been anything to audit.
Not to audit, right.
So it's a bit worse than just not auditing the numbers. Now, it would be a huge concession by these countries to give us the sort of data that we need to understand the situation. But I think from the point of view of human beings, of mankind, people need to make this step. And the people who know most about remaining reserves are probably the OPEC countries. I mean, on any of the numbers you look at, they probably control something like 80% of remaining reserves. So what do they lose by telling us what those numbers are? I mean, we're not going to... Bob Hirsch will tell you it will take you 15 years to not use their oil. I can't see that they lose anything by telling us what the numbers are. I'm pretty certain if we had numbers, auditable numbers as you described them, that they would be a lot less than the numbers that OPEC have been giving us. But how does that hurt them to tell us that? It makes oil even more valuable, really.
There are many, many factors that we don't know. At the end of the day today, we sit here, as we're closing this discussion, still facing with an impending world oil shortage upon us. No immediate action from any government to give us hope that in the near future we'll have some kind of a collaboration to help ease the situation. And
the opposite of anything.
The opposite of happening.
We see the Chinese, for instance, going out and buying up reserves. They're not sort of collaborating. They're not saying, hey, why don't we share with you, America? Why don't we share with you, France, and buy this oil field together? They're going to South America.
The Chinese get it, don't they?
The Chinese get this. The Chinese have got it for the last 4 or 5 years. They understand the problem, and they're doing something about it. Long term, I'm not sure they're doing enough, but they are starting to fill that energy gap that will exist over the next 20 years. Post 20 years, well, yeah, I mean, they're heavily into wind. They're looking at solar. I think the Chinese all over get it. Yes.
Perhaps a positive note. They say politicians will not state the problem unless they have a solution for it. So if politicians in China, because they have the money to do something with, they've got this tremendous surplus of reserves and so forth, and as one of the speakers last year said, the Chinese are run by engineers, which is good for you and me, by the way. Their engineers are not politicians, they're not attorneys, so they look at 2 + 2 is 4, and here's what we need to do, we need to implement plans. They are thinking post-oil.
Absolutely.
And they're strategizing.
Well, they're thinking late oil, certainly. That's why they're out there buying up reserves. They're thinking post-oil as well. That's why they're getting so heavily into wind. I think and we see the same thing on iron ore and so on. I think they are looking at diminishing reserves of a lot of natural commodities and actually doing something about it.
Jerry, it's always good with you. Thank you very much for being with us. And have a good trip back to Europe.
Don't hesitate to wake me at 4 o'clock.
We'll do. Thank you very much.
Thank you.